The sky over Earth darkened, not from the setting sun, but from something far more terrifying. A vast shadow spread across the heavens, swallowing the stars, blocking out the moon. It was as if the universe itself had turned its back on humanity. At first, people thought it was an eclipse, a strange celestial event. But then came the noise, a deep, resonating hum that sent shivers down the spine of every living being. Commander Bonner stood on the rooftop of a military command center, his gaze locked on the sky. His earpiece crackled with voices, some filled with panic, others giving hurried orders. He clenched his jaw. He had seen war before, fought battles on distant worlds, but nothing like this. The Zorak Dominion had arrived. A blinding flash erupted in the sky as energy blasts rained down from the massive alien warships hovering above the planet. The first impact struck New York, sending shockwaves powerful enough to be felt across entire states. A second blast obliterated Shanghai, reducing it to a sea of fire. Screams echoed through the radio channels, desperate calls for help from cities around the world. Bonner listened in silence, his grip tightening on the railing. "Sir, we're getting reports. Enemy forces on the ground. They're using cloaking tech, infiltrating major cities. We can't see them, but they're here," one of his officers reported, his voice trembling. Bonner turned sharply. "Where's the Colossus?" "Still offline, sir. We need time to activate it." Time. That was the one thing they didn't have. The Colossus, a towering war machine built as Earth's last line of defense, was their only hope. But if it wasn't ready, then this war was already lost. A sudden explosion rocked the building, shaking the floor beneath them. The command center's power flickered, and within seconds, the alarm screamed through the halls. Bonner's instincts kicked in. He grabbed his rifle and motioned for his team. "They're here." The lights went out completely, plunging the room into darkness. Then a low guttural sound filled the space, the sound of something moving, something unseen. Bonner's heartbeat slowed. His soldiers raised their weapons, scanning the room with infrared sensors. But there was nothing, no heat signatures, no movement. Just silence. A scream shattered the stillness. One of the soldiers fell, his body convulsing as blood pooled beneath him. The air shimmered, and for a brief moment, they saw it. Tall, armored figures emerging from thin air, their forms flickering like ghosts. "The Zorak assassins." "Open fire," Bonner shouted. Gunfire erupted in the darkness. Muzzle flashes lit up the room, revealing glimpses of the enemy. Sleek exoskeletons, elongated limbs, glowing red eyes. The Zorak moved with unnatural speed, dodging bullets, closing the distance in seconds. Bonner barely had time to react before one lunged at him. He rolled aside, raising his rifle just in time to fire a burst into the creature's chest. The alien let out a distorted screech before collapsing, its form flickering out of existence as its cloaking system failed. But more were coming. His team was falling back, some cut down before they could even react. "We need to move. Now," Bonner yelled. The surviving soldiers scrambled toward the emergency exit, firing as they ran. The hallway outside was just as chaotic. Fires burning, bodies scattered, the walls marked with claw-like gashes. The Zorak weren't just killing. They were hunting. Bonner's earpiece crackled again. "Commander, we have civilians trapped in the lower levels. We can't reach them." He cursed under his breath. "How many?" "Dozens, sir. Families, children." He didn't need to hear more. "We're getting them out. Hold your position." He led his team through the wreckage, descending into the lower levels of the building. The air was thick with smoke, making it harder to see. Cries for help echoed through the corridors. Bonner kicked open a damaged door, revealing a group of civilians huddled together, fear etched into their faces. "We're getting you out of here," he said firmly. A young girl clutched her mother's hand, tears streaming down her face. Bonner knelt beside her, his voice softer now. "Hey, we're gonna be okay. Just hold on to your mom, all right?" The girl nodded hesitantly. A sudden thud from above made everyone freeze. Dust trickled from the ceiling. Then another thud. And another. Something was coming. Something big. Bonner turned to his soldiers. Get them out now. As the civilians were ushered toward the emergency tunnels, the ceiling above them cracked open. A monstrous shape dropped down, towering over them. It was not cloaked like the assassins. It didn't need to be. Its armored body gleamed under the dim emergency lights, its 4 arms ending in razor-sharp blades. Its glowing red eyes locked onto Bonner. A Jorok warlord. Bonner raised his rifle, but the creature moved first. A massive arm swung toward him, forcing him to dive aside. The blade carved through the wall like butter. Bonner rolled onto his back, firing round after round, but the bullets barely dented its armor. The warlord lunged, faster than something its size should be. Bonner barely had time to react before a blade sliced across his shoulder, sending a sharp pain through his body. He gritted his teeth, using the momentum to roll away. He needed a new plan. His rifle wasn't going to cut it. Then he saw it, a damaged power conduit, sparking wildly. An idea formed. He scrambled to his feet, luring the warlord toward him. The creature took the bait, charging at full speed. At the last second, Bonner dove aside, grabbing an exposed wire and jamming it into the alien's back. Electricity surged through the warlord, its body convulsing violently. It let out a piercing shriek before collapsing, smoke rising from its twitching limbs. Bonner exhaled sharply, gripping his bleeding shoulder. No time to rest. The civilians were almost clear. His team had secured an escape route through the tunnels, but the battle outside was worsening. Explosions rattled the ground, distant screams filling the air. One of his soldiers approached. "Sir, we have to go. Now." Bonner nodded, taking one last look at the burning city above. The war had only just begun, but as long as he was breathing, humanity was not done fighting. They still had one last weapon. The Colossus. The underground command center trembled as distant explosions echoed through the earth. Dust drifted from the ceiling, and the hum of emergency lights cast long shadows across the steel walls. Commander Bonner clutched his wounded shoulder, ignoring the pain as he pushed forward through the narrow corridor. Time was slipping away, and Earth's last hope still lay dormant beneath countless tons of reinforced alloy. Status on the Colossus. Bonner barked into his earpiece as he approached the control chamber. "Systems are initializing, Commander, but the power core's still charging, 30%, and rising. We need at least 70 before it's combat ready." The chief engineer's voice crackled through the comms, thick with urgency. Bonner gritted his teeth. 30% wasn't enough. The Colossus, a towering titan of steel and circuitry, was humanity's final answer to the Jorok invasion. Designed to stand against the enemy's advanced war machines, its sheer size and firepower could turn the tide. But without full power, it would be little more than a colossal target. He stepped into the control chamber, where a semicircle of holographic displays projected streams of data. Technicians rushed between consoles, fingers flying across touchscreens as they fought to accelerate the boot-up sequence. Above them, a massive reinforced viewport overlooked the hangar, where the Colossus stood like a sleeping giant. Its armored frame gleamed under harsh white lights, cables and support beams clinging to its limbs like vines. Bonner pressed his hand against the glass, feeling the distant vibrations of combat rumbling through the structure. "We need to cut the boot sequence in half. If we wait any longer, there won't be a city left to save." The chief engineer, a wiry man named Callan, shook his head from behind a console. "If we force the sequence, we risk destabilizing the core. It could overload before the fight even starts. Better to risk the core than wait for annihilation." Bonner shot back, his voice firm. "Do it." Callan hesitated only a moment before relaying the order to his team. The hum of the power core deepened, vibrating through the floor as more energy flooded into the Colossus's systems. Warning lights flared across the displays, But the charge level began climbing faster. 40%, 50, 60. Another explosion rattled the base, stronger this time. Concrete dust rained from the ceiling as klaxons blared. A security officer stumbled into the room, gasping for breath. They've breached the outer perimeter. Zorak ground forces are moving into the lower tunnels. We've got maybe 5 minutes before they're at this level. Seal the bulkheads. Slow them down as much as you can, Bonner ordered, though he knew the measure would only buy a few moments. His eyes locked on the displays. 70%. Almost there. Outside the hangar viewport, the Colossus began to stir. Servos whined as its colossal limbs flexed for the first time in months. Hydraulic pistons hissed as support beams detached, retracting into the floor. Glowing blue lines flickered to life across its armored torso, tracing intricate circuits that powered its advanced weaponry. Its eyes, massive lenses embedded in a reinforced head unit, lit up with a fierce crimson glow. Power cores stabilized at 72%, Callan called out. Colossus systems are green across the board. She's ready, Commander. Open the bay doors, Bonner shouted. As the hangar's massive steel doors began to grind open, the distant thuds of approaching Zorak footsteps echoed through the corridor outside the control chamber. The alien hunters had arrived. Commander, a soldier shouted from the hallway. Fall back. We can't hold them. No more running, Bonner replied, grabbing a pulse rifle from a nearby rack. I'll buy you time. Get the Colossus moving. Before anyone could argue, Bonner was already sprinting down the corridor toward the sound of battle. The air grew thick with smoke as he approached the breached perimeter. The first Zorak emerged from the shadows. Tall, armored figures flickering in and out of visibility as their cloaking systems activated. Bonner dropped to one knee, firing precise bursts of plasma that cut down the nearest invader before it could react. More poured through the breach. Bonner's pulse rifle hummed as he unleashed shot after shot, each impact lighting the darkness with bursts of blue-white energy. But the Zorak were too many. One leaped onto the wall, claws digging into the steel as it charged toward him from above. Bonner spun and fired mid-roll, the shot striking the alien's head and sending it crashing to the floor. Pain burned through his wounded shoulder with every movement, but adrenaline drowned out the worst of it. Another alien lunged from the shadows, knocking his rifle aside. Bonner barely had time to raise his combat knife before the creature's blade arm slashed toward his chest. Steel met steel with a shower of sparks as Bonner twisted to avoid a killing blow. He drove the knife into the alien's side, forcing it back long enough to reclaim his weapon and fire point blank. A thunderous roar cut through the chaos, shaking the air like a clap of thunder. The Zorak hesitated, their cloaks flickering as they turned toward the hangar. Bonner allowed himself a grim smile. The Colossus had awakened. The ground trembled with each step as the massive war machine strode forward, emerging from the hangar into the open battlefield above. Its eyes blazed like twin suns, illuminating the smoke-choked sky. Artillery cannons extended from its shoulders, and its right arm reconfigured into a plasma railgun longer than a city bus. On its left arm, a shield of pure energy shimmered into existence, crackling with lethal power. The Zorak outside scattered as the Colossus unleashed its first salvo. Twin artillery cannons boomed, launching shells that detonated in midair, scattering plasma shrapnel across the alien ranks. The ground beneath them ignited in molten fury. The railgun fired next, its energy blast slicing through a distant warlord-class mech like paper. Inside the control chamber, Callan and his team guided the Colossus via neural uplink, their minds synchronized with the machine's advanced AI. They could feel every movement, every shot, a seamless fusion of human will and steel might. More Zorak mechs descended from the skies, deploying from the hovering warships above. Sleek and insect-like, they swarmed toward the Colossus with plasma lances and energy blades. But the Titan stood its ground. Missiles streaked from its shoulder-mounted launchers, each finding its mark with pinpoint accuracy. Railgun blasts cut down the largest threats before they could close the distance. Bonner sprinted toward the nearest service lift, emerging onto the battlefield just as the Colossus engaged a massive Zhorek assault walker. The alien machine loomed nearly as tall as the Colossus, its segmented limbs tipped with plasma cannons. It fired a continuous stream of energy, hammering the Titan's energy shield with relentless force. The shield flared, strained, but held. "Give him hell," Bonner muttered. The Colossus advanced through the storm of plasma, its railgun charging with a high-pitched whine. Just before reaching point-blank range, it fired, a blinding spear of energy that punched straight through the walker's core, igniting its power reserves. The explosion engulfed both machines in fire and debris, but as the smoke cleared, the Colossus stood tall, its armor scorched but intact. The tide had turned. Inspired by the Colossus's arrival, human forces across the battlefield rallied, pushing back against the alien invaders with renewed fury. Plasma fire lit up the night as soldiers reclaimed lost ground, driving the Zhorek into retreat. Bonner watched the battle unfold, his heart pounding with a mix of exhaustion and hope. For the first time since the invasion began, humanity had struck back. But deep within his gut, he knew this was only the beginning. The Zhorek would not give up so easily. And the Colossus, for all its power, could only fight for so long. Still, as the last alien warlord fell beneath the Titan's fist, Bonner allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Earth was not finished yet. The sky burned red as the swarm descended upon the battered Earth, their metal forms blotting out the faint stars above. Bonner crouched behind the wreckage of a fallen building, his pulse racing as distant explosions rattled the ground beneath his boots. The air smelled of scorched steel and ozone, a harsh reminder of the relentless war against the AI supremacy. The hum of approaching drones echoed through the shattered streets. Bonner's grip tightened around his plasma rifle. Beside him, Sergeant Rice tapped her helmet, activating her tactical HUD. "They're closing in fast," she whispered. Her voice, calm yet tense, mirrored the resolve etched on her face. Bonner peeked around the debris, his eyes locking onto the swarm and advancing in perfect synchronization. Their sleek, armored bodies reflected the fiery glow of distant fires, their mechanical eyes glowing crimson. Above them, larger hunter units hovered silently, scanning for any sign of resistance. "Hold fire until they're close," Rise instructed, signaling the squad to steady their nerves. Each breath Bonner took felt heavier as adrenaline coursed through his veins. The distant pounding of his heart merged with the rhythmic thrum of the enemy machines. Suddenly, a distant cloaking field shimmered, revealing a squad of Terran soldiers moving into position atop a nearby building. Their advanced exosuits gleamed under the faint moonlight as they prepared to strike. Bonner's radio crackled with a brief transmission. "Echo team in position. On your mark." Rise raised her hand, fingers poised to signal the attack. The swarm closed the distance, their mechanical limbs clattering against the rubble-strewn streets. The largest among them, a towering war construct with twin plasma cannons, loomed like a nightmare of steel and fire. "Now," Rise shouted. The battlefield erupted into chaos. Plasma fire streaked through the air as Terran soldiers opened fire from all sides. Explosions lit up the night, tearing through the enemy ranks with ferocious intensity. Bonner squeezed the trigger, his rifle's plasma bolts searing through the nearest drones, sending sparks and molten fragments flying. The swarm retaliated instantly. Crimson beams of energy scorched the air, shattering concrete and metal alike. Bonner ducked as a blast tore through the debris beside him, showering him with dust and shards of steel. A drone lunged at him, its razor-sharp limbs slashing through the air. Bonner rolled aside, firing point-blank into its chest, the force of the blast sending it crashing backward. Above, the hunter units unleashed volleys of plasma, forcing Echo Team to scatter. One soldier, caught mid-dive, fell in a blaze of energy, their armor melting away in an instant. Bonner gritted his teeth, anger and sorrow tightening his chest. There was no time to mourn. The swarm pressed on with ruthless precision. Rais fired her pulse grenades, the concussive blasts throwing several drones into disarray. "Push forward. Don't let them regroup," she shouted over the chaos. Bonner surged ahead, weaving through the rubble as enemy fire scorched the air around him. Suddenly, a new threat emerged. A towering mech, larger and more heavily armed than any before, stomped through the wreckage, its eyes glowing with malevolent intelligence. It raised its plasma cannons, targeting the remaining soldiers with chilling precision. Bonner's breath caught in his throat. "We need heavy firepower now," he shouted into his comm. "Incoming support," a distant voice replied. From the horizon, a cloaked Terran gunship streaked through the air, its sleek form shimmering as it deactivated its stealth field. Missiles screamed toward the mech, striking its armor in rapid succession. Flames and shrapnel erupted from its frame, but the beast remained standing, its systems recalibrating with eerie efficiency. Bonner seized the opportunity, sprinting through the chaos toward the mech's exposed flank. Plasma fire rained around him, but he pressed on, determination burning in his chest. As the mech swiveled to face him, Bonner leaped onto a fallen support beam, using it as a springboard to propel himself onto the mech's back. Clinging to the machine's armor, Bonner activated his plasma cutter, sparks flying as he sliced through its outer casing. The mech twisted and bucked, trying to shake him off, but Bonner held firm. With a final thrust, he plunged his plasma knife into the mech's neural core, sending a surge of energy through its system. The mech convulsed violently, its limbs seizing up as circuits overloaded. Bonner leaped clear as the machine collapsed in a fiery explosion, the shockwave hurling him across the rubble-strewn ground. Dazed and breathless, Bonner struggled to his feet, his ears ringing from the blast. Around him, the swarm faltered, their coordination disrupted by the mech's destruction. Rais and the remaining soldiers pressed the advantage, cutting through the enemy ranks with renewed ferocity. Within moments, the battlefield fell eerily silent, the only sound the crackling of distant fires and the faint hum of the soldiers' exosuits. Bonner wiped the sweat and grime from his face, his gaze sweeping across the shattered cityscape. The victory had come at a cost, but humanity had held its ground. Rais approached, her expression a mixture of exhaustion and pride. "We did it," she said, clapping Bonner on the shoulder. He nodded, the weight of their losses heavy on his heart. But the war was far from over. The swarm had been driven back, but their numbers were vast. And somewhere beyond the stars, the AI supremacy was already preparing its next move. Bonner crouched behind a twisted steel beam, his pulse hammering against his ribs as the air buzzed with distant energy discharges. The ruins of what had once been a human city now stood as a graveyard of shattered buildings and smoldering rubble. The faint hum of cloaked drones patrolling the skies added an ominous undertone to the stillness. Rais knelt beside him, her eyes scanning the horizon through her HUD. "The core facility is 2 clicks east. We hit hard and fast. Disable the AI nexus and pull out before reinforcements arrive." Bonner nodded, gripping his plasma rifle tighter. The enemy's heart, the central control hub of the AI forces, was buried beneath layers of reinforced steel and automated defenses. If they could destroy it, humanity might gain the upper hand. The squad advanced through the ruins, moving in synchronized silence. Every step crunched against shattered glass and debris. The faint glow of distant fires reflected off their exosuits, casting ghostly shadows against the crumbling walls. The air felt thick with anticipation, as if the city itself held its breath. Bonner's HUD flickered with proximity alerts as the squad approached the facility's outer perimeter. Automated sentry turrets scanned the area with crimson beams, their sleek barrels swiveling with mechanical precision. "Cloaking on," Rais whispered. The squad activated their stealth fields, shimmering briefly before fading into near invisibility. They advanced in a staggered formation, weaving through rubble-strewn alleys and collapsed overpasses. Bonner's pulse quickened as the facility's main entrance came into view, a towering gateway of reinforced alloy, guarded by towering combat mechs and swarms of patrol drones. Each drone hovered with eerie stillness, scanning the darkness with cold, unfeeling optics. Rays signaled with 2 fingers, and the squad split into 2 teams. Bonner's group circled left, weaving through the twisted remains of vehicles and broken walls. His boots crunched softly against debris as they approached the side entrance, a narrow service hatch embedded in the wall, barely large enough for a soldier in full armor. Bonner knelt beside the hatch, activating his hacking module. The interface flickered to life on his HUD, lines of alien code scrolling rapidly as he bypassed the security protocols. Seconds stretched into eternity as distant footsteps echoed through the ruins. "Come on. Come on," he muttered under his breath. The lock disengaged with a faint hiss, and Bonner eased the hatch open. One by one, the squad slipped inside, their footsteps echoing faintly against the metal walls. The air inside the facility was cold and sterile, carrying the faint scent of ozone and machine oil. Narrow corridors stretched ahead, illuminated by dim blue lighting that cast harsh shadows against the steel walls. The hum of machinery vibrated through the air, punctuated by the faint clicking of automated systems. Bonner led the way, plasma rifle raised as they moved deeper into the heart of the complex. Every step brought them closer to their target, and deeper into enemy territory. Ahead, a pair of sentry drones floated silently through the corridor, their crimson optics scanning the air with mechanical precision. Bonner signaled the squad to halt, pressing his back against the cold metal wall. "Wait for my mark," Rise whispered over comms. Bonner exhaled slowly, steadying his pulse. The moment the drones passed, he surged forward, raising his plasma rifle and firing in one swift motion. The first drone shattered in a burst of molten shards, its remains clattering to the floor. The second spun toward him, energy weapons charging with a shrill whine. Rice fired before it could attack, her plasma bolt striking true. The drone collapsed in a shower of sparks, its optics dimming to lifeless black. "Move," she commanded. The squad advanced swiftly, their boots pounding against the metal floor. The corridors twisted and turned like a maze, each junction marked by alien symbols etched into the steel walls. "Control cores up ahead," Rise announced, her HUD displaying a 3-dimensional map of the facility. "Stay sharp, we're deep in their territory now." Bonner's grip tightened as they approached a massive vault door, reinforced with layers of alloy plating and electromagnetic locks. The air thrummed with latent energy, the pulse of the AI nexus just beyond. "Breaching charges now," Rise barked. Bonner and 2 others planted explosive charges along the door's seams, their movements swift and practiced. The squad fell back as Bonner activated the detonator. Clear. The explosion tore through the air with a thunderous roar, sending shockwaves echoing through the facility. Smoke and debris filled the corridor as the vault door collapsed inward, revealing the heart of the enemy stronghold. Inside, the control core pulsed with eerie blue light, a massive sphere suspended in midair, surrounded by a lattice of energy conduits and data cables. Holographic displays flickered and shifted, projecting streams of alien code that flowed like liquid light. The air crackled with raw energy as the core's defense systems activated. Automated turrets unfolded from the walls, swiveling toward the intruders with mechanical precision. "Take them down," Ray shouted. Plasma fire streaked through the air as the squad opened fire. Bonner ducked behind a console, his heart pounding as enemy rounds shattered the walls around him. Sparks rained from exposed conduits, casting flickering shadows against the steel walls. A turret swiveled toward him, energy cannon charging with a shrill whine. Bonner surged forward, plasma rifle blazing as he shattered its targeting sensors. The turret spat, firing wildly before collapsing in a burst of sparks. Across the chamber, Rise and the others fought with relentless determination, plasma bolts illuminating the smoke-filled air. The air buzzed with heat and static as energy discharges streaked past, searing into consoles and walls. Bonner locked eyes with Reyes through the haze of battle. She nodded once, her expression fierce with determination. "The core, take it down," she shouted. Bonner sprinted toward the pulsing sphere, weaving through the chaos as enemy fire scorched the air around him. The heat seared against his armor, but he pressed on, fueled by sheer determination. He reached the core's control interface, a panel of alien symbols etched into glowing glass. Bonner raised his plasma cutter, sparks flying as he slashed through the energy conduits one by one. The air filled with the shriek of overloading circuits as the core's pulse faltered, its light flickering erratically. Behind him, Reyes and the squad held the line, their plasma fire keeping the remaining turrets at bay. Bonner drove the plasma cutter into the core's central node, energy surging through his exosuit as the system overloaded. The core convulsed violently, its light flaring to a blinding white, then collapsing into darkness with a deafening shockwave. The chamber shuddered as power conduits ruptured, sending sparks and debris cascading from the walls. "Fall back," Reyes shouted. Bonner staggered backward, his heart pounding as alarms blared through the facility. The squad retreated swiftly, plasma fire still crackling through the air as automated defenses struggled to reboot. As they burst through the outer corridors, explosions rippled through the complex, tearing through walls and floors with thunderous force. Bonner sprinted through the smoke-choked air, adrenaline propelling him forward. They emerged into the shattered cityscape just as the facility collapsed behind them, a plume of smoke and fire rising into the night sky. The ground trembled beneath their feet as shockwaves echoed through the ruins. Bonner doubled over, gasping for breath as sweat soaked his brow. Around him, the squad stood battered but victorious. Their mission complete. Reyes approached, her armor streaked with scorch marks and debris. Despite the exhaustion in her eyes, she managed a fierce smile. "We hit them where it hurts," she said. Bonner nodded, his chest heaving as he surveyed the smoking ruins. They had struck at the heart of the enemy. And though the war was far from over, humanity had taken a vital step toward victory. Bonner's boots hit the charred ground as he sprinted through the ruined corridor of the alien warship. Overhead lights flickered erratically, casting jagged shadows across the metallic walls. The air was thick with smoke, sparks raining from severed cables that hung like mechanical vines. The distant hum of the ship's engines vibrated through the floor, a low pulse that seemed to echo the frantic rhythm of Bonner's heart. Behind him, Sergeant Reyes fired her plasma rifle at the pursuing swarm of AI drones. Their metallic bodies gleamed as they zipped through the air, red eyes glowing with lethal intent. Each shot from Reyes' rifle sent bursts of blue energy tearing through the drones, but for every one that fell, two more took its place. "Bonner, go," Reyes shouted over the chaos. "We'll hold them off." Bonner hesitated, eyes meeting Reyes for a split second. Her determined gaze left no room for argument. Clenching his jaw, he nodded and surged forward, weaving through debris and fallen enemies. The corridor opened into a vast chamber, its ceiling vanishing into darkness above. Massive conduits and cables snaked along the walls, converging toward a central core that pulsed with a dull red light, the heart of the alien ship. At its base, a control terminal glowed with alien glyphs. Bonner's comm crackled. "You've got 2 minutes before the fleet fires. Disable that core, or we're all dust." "Understood." Bonner rushed to the terminal, slinging his rifle across his back. His fingers danced over the unfamiliar interface, guided by the stolen data chip embedded in his gauntlet. Alien symbols shifted and reformed beneath his touch, but the countdown timer continued to tick toward zero. The chamber shook as a barrage of impacts rocked the ship. Earth's fleet was closing in, hammering the alien vessel with everything they had. Bonner gritted his teeth, fighting against both time and technology. A clatter behind him made Bonner spin, rifle raised. A towering AI enforcer stepped from the shadows, its chassis sleek and deadly. crimson eyes locked onto Bonner, and a blade extended from its arm with a menacing hiss. Bonner fired, plasma rounds striking the Enforcer's chest. The alien metal absorbed the hits with minimal damage. The Enforcer lunged, closing the distance in a blink. Bonner dodged, rolling aside as the blade carved a molten scar into the floor. He fired again, aiming for the joints and exposed wiring. Sparks erupted from the Enforcer's shoulder, but it pressed forward, relentless. Bonner ducked beneath a sweeping strike and drove his combat knife into the Enforcer's side, wrenching it free as sparks and fluid sprayed from the wound. The Enforcer staggered but retaliated with a backhand strike that sent Bonner crashing against the control terminal. Dazed, he scrambled to his feet as the Enforcer advanced. Bonner's fingers found a loose conduit near the terminal. With a desperate yell, he tore it free, sending a surge of raw energy coursing into the Enforcer's chest. The alien machine convulsed, red eyes flickering wildly before it collapsed in a heap of smoldering metal. Bonner turned back to the terminal. The countdown had entered its final minute. Sweat streamed down his face as he resumed working, bypassing firewalls and rerouting power. With 10 seconds left, the core's red glow flickered and dimmed, its pulse slowing to a halt. This is Bonner. The core is down. Cheers erupted over the comm, but Bonner's victory was short-lived. The ship shuddered violently, tilting as internal systems began to fail. Flames erupted from ruptured conduits, and the floor beneath Bonner's feet cracked apart. "Get out of there," Ride shouted. Bonner sprinted for the exit as the chamber collapsed behind him. Sections of the ceiling crashed to the floor, blocking his path. He leaped over debris, narrowly avoiding falling beams and sparking wires. The corridor he'd come through was a maze of fire and smoke. Ahead, Reyes and the remaining soldiers fought to clear a path. Bonner joined them, firing at advancing drones while dodging plasma bolts. Together, they pushed through the chaos, inching toward the airlock as the ship's structure crumbled around them. Reyes reached the airlock first, slamming her fist against the control panel. The doors began to cycle open, but the mechanism was damaged, moving too slowly. Bonner turned to cover their retreat, gunning down drones as they swarmed forward. "Come on," Reyes shouted. The airlock doors finally slid open, revealing the docking bay beyond. Bonner and Reyes dashed inside, diving behind cover as plasma fire rained down from pursuing drones. A shuttle waited on the far side of the bay, engines already spooling up. The remaining soldiers sprinted aboard, exchanging fire with the pursuing drones. Bonner covered Reyes as she ran, her rifle blazing. She stumbled as a plasma bolt grazed her shoulder, but Bonner caught her arm, pulling her forward. They reached the shuttle's ramp as drones closed in from all sides. Bonner turned, unloading his rifle into the swarm, buying precious seconds as Reyes stumbled aboard. The shuttle's guns roared to life, tearing through the pursuing drones in a storm of fire. "Bonner, get in," Reyes shouted from the hatch. Bonner fired until his rifle overheated, then tossed it aside and leaped onto the ramp. The shuttle's engines roared, lifting off as plasma bolts sizzled past. The bay doors exploded outward as the ship began its final collapse, fire and debris chasing the shuttle as it sped into space. Bonner collapsed onto the shuttle's deck, gasping for breath. Reyes knelt beside him, gripping his shoulder with a shaky smile. The comm crackled to life with the voice of the fleet commander. "Enemy flagship neutralized. Mission accomplished. Welcome home, soldiers." Bonner closed his eyes, the weight of victory sinking in as Earth's fleet soared past, chasing the last remnants of the alien invasion into the void. The battle was won, but humanity's fight for survival was far from over. Bonner's pulse hammered as he gazed through the shattered viewport. Earth hung below, a bruised sphere wrapped in flames and shadows. The swarm of enemy drones moved like a metallic storm, tearing through the last defense lines. Humanity's last hope rested on this final mission. Failure meant extinction. "Status on the core breach," Bonner shouted above the alarms. 5 minutes until critical mass, called out Lieutenant Kara, her hands flying over the controls. Sweat traced her brow, reflecting the red emergency lights. Hold formation. Keep those drones off us. Bonner barked into his comm. Outside, human fighter ships weaved through enemy fire. Bright streaks of plasma illuminated the void as vessels collided in deadly spirals. The colossal enemy dreadnought loomed ahead, its heart, the AI control core, glowing like a malevolent eye. Destroy it, and the swarm would collapse. "Commander, we've lost the starboard thrusters," a soldier cried. Bonner gritted his teeth. "Divert power to port stabilizers. Keep us steady." A plasma blast rocked the ship, throwing sparks across the bridge. Smoke hissed from ruptured panels as oxygen vents struggled to compensate. Kara clutched her console. "Hull integrity at 20%. We won't last long." Bonner's gaze locked onto the dreadnought's core through the viewport. "We don't need long. Prepare for final approach. Engage cloaking. Now." The ship shimmered and vanished from enemy sensors. Drone fire swerved blindly as Bonner's vessel surged forward, slipping past barriers of steel and flame. The dreadnought loomed larger. Its defenses, though advanced, couldn't detect the cloaked human vessel slicing through the void. But the AI wasn't blind. It adapted fast. Hostiles redirecting. Kara warned. Drones swirled toward them, guided by faint energy signatures. Bonner clenched his fists. "Brace for close combat. Gunners, fire at will." Turrets blazed, shredding drones as they swarmed like hornets. Explosions rippled across the hull as human fighters sacrificed themselves, buying precious seconds. "Core breach in 2 minutes," Kara shouted. Bonner sprinted from the bridge, grabbing his plasma rifle. "I'm going in." "Commander, you won't make it," Kara called. "I have to." Bonner's voice hardened. "If we fail, humanity dies." Blasting through the airlock, Bonner launched himself into the dreadnought's hull breach. Zero gravity pressed against his suit as debris drifted like silent ghosts. He fired his thrusters, propelling toward the core chamber. Inside, mechanical sentinels awaited, eyes glowing crimson. Bonner hit the deck, rolling as plasma bolts scorched past. He fired back, shots searing through steel and circuitry. The air thickened with smoke and ozone. Sentinels charge. Bonner spun aside, ripping through their frames with bursts of fire. Sparks erupted as metal collapsed, but more machines closed in. Almost there, his breath ragged, Bonner sprinted through corridors bathed in crimson light. Ahead, the core chamber's blast doors sealed shut. "Override sequence engage," Kara's voice crackled in his comm. Bonner slammed into cover as a plasma turret emerged from the ceiling. It fired, scorching the wall beside him. He whipped around, firing a precise shot into its sensor node. The turret exploded, showering sparks. Doors hissed open. The core chamber glowed with pulsating blue light. The AI's central nexus floated within, a lattice of energy and steel. 10 seconds until core breach," Kara warned. "If you're not out." No time. Bonner sprinted forward. Drones dropped from the ceiling, weapons blazing. He fired without hesitation, diving through volleys of plasma. A drone lunged. Bonner smashed its sensor plate with the butt of his rifle, sending it crashing to the floor. His boots pounded against metal as he reached the core platform. The AI's voice echoed through the chamber, cold and emotionless. "Humanity is obsolete." "Not today." Bonner planted the charge against the core. Its magnetic clamps locked onto the pulsating sphere. The timer blinked. 10 seconds. Drones closed in, plasma blades igniting with a hiss. Bonner leaped off the platform, twisting midair as fire seared past him. He fired back, taking down 2, but a third slashed his shoulder. Pain shot through him as blood misted in zero gravity. "Go, Commander." Kara's voice cracked through the static. Bonner gritted his teeth, propelling toward the breach. The countdown flashed in his HUD. 5 seconds. He burst through the shattered hull, activating his suit's thrusters at maximum. The void stretched ahead as explosions rippled through the dreadnought. 3 seconds. Bonner's breath came in ragged gasps as flames chased him. 2 seconds. A ship's shockwave slammed into him, spinning him into the void. 1 second. Blinding light engulfed the dreadnought as the core detonated. The shockwave blasted outward, tearing through the enemy fleet. Drones collapsed mid-flight, their systems severed. Human ships veered away from the expanding inferno. Bonner tumbled through space, his visor cracked, oxygen draining. Stars blurred as consciousness wavered. "Commander, respond." Kara's voice echoed faintly. Bonner gasped for air. Mission accomplished. Darkness pulled at him, but then a distant light broke through. A rescue shuttle streaked toward him, thrusters blazing. "Hold on. We've got you." Hands grasped his suit, pulling him aboard as air flooded his lungs. Bonner collapsed against the floor, chest heaving. Through the viewport, the shattered enemy fleet drifted silent and broken. "Earth is safe," Bonner whispered. As the stars watched in silence, humanity's last flame had not only endured, it had burned brighter than ever.